Welcome to another installment of Monday Q&A. Hope you all had a ripper weekend and you're enjoying your time on Earth, playing lots of guitar, generally being good to one another. If you've got a question you would like me to answer on next week's video, simply put it in the comment section below. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, check the video description because there are a variety of ways to support me directly. I want to give a massive shout out to everybody who's gone and bought some Ragdoll music and to my amazing patrons over at Patreon. I did a patron-only Q&A, which was super fun this week. Again, just check the video description in there. You can also join the Discord server and grab some free IRs. A reminder that Ragdoll is playing in Melbourne at the Prince Band Room on June 23rd. Everybody in Melbourne who's watching, or if you're going to be there, come and hang out at the show. It should be awesome. It's with our mates Sisters Doll, who put on an incredible show, and the Prince is one of my favorite venues that I've ever played before, so I'm looking forward to playing there. And we've also got a single coming out the week before that. More details about that very soon, but I'm super excited for all of you to hear it. Also, if you want to win the Titanum 12 unit that I demoed a couple of weeks ago, we're running a competition over on my Discord server. I will announce the winner of that next week. But yeah, go join the server and follow the instructions on there to register for a chance to win some cool free gear. All right, let's answer some questions. First one comes from my mate GT Singh. Go and check out GT's channel if you love tasty guitar tones. Fantastic player. They make some of my favorite videos over on YouTube. GT wanted to know how I deal with the pickup selector being in different positions on different guitars. The pickup selector thing has come up a little bit recently. I posted a photo of my new DGT on Instagram, and somebody pointed out that the pickup selector's kind of in a weird place if you're used to, playing a Strat or Tele or a Les Paul. I do find myself when I go from my single cut to something like my McCarty or my DGT that I do a few false flicks of the non-existent toggle switch. Sometimes you just get really used to it kind of being on the upper horn or being on like the lower part of the belly, whatever you would call that. It's not the horn, whatever the opposite of a horn is. Anyway, yeah, I do get that sometimes, but I've been playing the PRS stuff for long enough to kind of know that it's like, if it's not there, then it's in the other spot. Same thing when I'm playing a Strat, I know I'm playing a Strat. There's a lot of kind of little indicators underneath my fingers, so I kind of just know instinctively where the toggle's going to be. The thing that got me recently was I borrowed a beautiful Custom 24 the last time we were in Melbourne, and the 5-way selector on there was kind of in a weird place. It had an extra knob for the piezo pickup on there. So where the 5-way was like on the other side of the knobs, and I wasn't super comfortable switching that. So I think I just did the entire gig on the bridge pickup, which, was okay. I do like the neck pickup for some leads from time to time on there. So it's a good one. Where does everybody like their pickup selector? Are you a Les Paul person, a Strat person, or kind of the PRS McCarty style switch person? Let me know in the comments. Next one comes from friend of the channel, patron and subscriber, and all-round good bloke, Rutger. Suggestions for a small power amp for using at home with a modeling setup. Doesn't really seem like there's a lot of options aside from the Seymour Duncan stuff underneath the Seymour Duncan stuff. I know people like the kind of Quilter power blocks as well, but again, they're a similar kind of SD style thing. What immediately comes to mind are the Electro Harmonics, like the Magnum. I think there's like a 44 one and maybe like a 22 one or something like that. I've tried those in the past and they are totally fine. They do kind of crap themselves when you turn them up a little bit too much, but if you just need kind of low volume home practice, they work pretty well. My understanding is they use some fairly accessible off-the-shelf parts to do that. So you may just kind of want to look up how you could build one yourself. I know you're very handy with a soldering iron after all, Rutgers. So that might be the way, just kind of find those plans online and build yourself a little kind of tiny pedal board power amp, because they are definitely handy. And even the Electro Harmonics ones are relatively cheap. They fit in your gig bag and they're a very handy little backup for your main backup if you are gigging. What's the first thing that I would play if somebody handed me a 59 Les Paul? I like to think that I would play some really appropriate thing on a 59 Les Paul. Like I would rip out the intro to Still Got the Blues, or I would play Mr. Big by Free, or maybe some kind of obscure Paul Kossoff lick, or maybe something off the Beano album. But the reality is I would probably play a G chord and then a D chord and then an A chord just to see how well in tone the guitar is. That's my kind of routine for anything that I play. I've never had the chance to play a real 59 burst, but if you go back through some videos on the channel, I did get to try some 59 Gibsons over at the Zen Amps Vault, a Les Paul Jr. that was incredible. It was just like Angus and Malcolm in one guitar. And then one of the greatest vintage guitars I've ever played, a 59 ES 335 that haunts my dreams. That thing was pretty special, and I can see why people get kind of hung up on those vintage Gibsons. So yeah, they were incredible. I have heard some people say that, you know, there's some 59 bursts out there that are just kind of average guitars, but then some people who say, well, when you play a good one, it's like the greatest thing on earth. So I always like to throw things back to people. So has anybody played a real 59 burst? Let me know in the comments. I also played a Gil Euron replica that was one of the best guitars I've ever played, and that was a 59 burst replica. So Gil knows what's up. I'm sure there's some of you who have played the real deal, and I would love to hear from all of you. Why did I change the Q&As from Friday to Monday? I might have mentioned this. If I didn't mention it, I apologize. I probably should have mentioned it earlier. Essentially, Fridays for me are gig days, so I always like to leave filming the Q&A as late as possible so that I can include as many questions as possible, because some people will leave questions on the day and I like to try and include them. But it was always a rush, and always kind of felt like I wasn't, you know, relaxed enough, or I'd start at 1:30 and I need to leave for a gig at 2, so I just have to rush the entire process. This way I can read your questions and think about them over the weekend, sit down after a coffee and a cup of tea, and then hopefully provide you with some, you know, considered answers. Let me know if you've been liking the change to Mondays. Where did my STR Les Paul copy go? I actually sold that to one of my students. So Dennis, if you're watching this, I hope you're really, really enjoying that guitar. It is a fantastic playing and sounding guitar, and watching Dennis just really, really progress on the instrument over the last couple of years on that guitar has been pretty awesome. So yeah, it was a great guitar. I still really, really would recommend picking one up if you can see them, but just kind of totally surplus to my requirements at the time. And, you know, having someone come in and go, you know, Leon, I think I want to buy a Les Paul, but I want something that's like this guitar that I play every week when I come in here. It was sort of like, well, do you want to just buy that guitar? It seems like you're digging it. So sometimes with instruments and with gear, you can have a really great piece of gear, but it's not the perfect piece of gear for you, and it might be the perfect piece of gear for somebody else. So that's kind of the fun, I think, when it comes to gear hunting and collecting and all those kind of things is, you know, sometimes you just find something that works so much better for somebody else, and it feels right to pass it on. Is the AX8 still worth it in 2023? Yes, it is a fantastic sounding device. I still love the foot switching layout on it. If you use it with AX8 Edit, it is an absolute breeze to use. Having said that, I think the FM3 and the FM9 are easier to use on the unit. There's more routing options, there's more power, and they're a little bit easier to dial in. But again, we're talking about, you know, a few percentage points in terms of overall usability. I found it hard the last time I went and played an AX8 after having used the FM3 and FM9 for a little while. So I would still say, you know, if you've got the extra cash to grab an FM3 or an FM9, then do it. But the AX8 is still fantastic. I did so many gigs on that thing. I did so many good gigs on that thing. It's a piece of gear that is very near and dear to my heart. Speaking of modeling devices, what are some wishes for a next generation modeler on my behalf? I feel like you could do the Homer Simpson designs a car thing with this really easy. Like, I want it to sound like a fractal. I want it to be as easy to use as something like a Helix or a Headrush. And I want the quad cortex form factor. Go. Somebody make that, and you know, then then you get the Homer, and you end up being Herb, pulling all their hair out and saying I'm ruined. So I feel like there's so many good options at the moment that it's not really about trying to make these things sound better. It's about optimizing the workflow. And I think some people get hung up on UI, like it's got to have a touchscreen to have a good UI. I've played some products with a touchscreen that have horrible user interfaces. They're difficult to use and they're difficult to pull sounds on. I've played some units where the UI is maybe not as modern as the other ones, but the stuff sounds so good that you just kind of dial up an amp, a cab, a reverb, a delay, and it's all awesome sounding, and you just start playing. So you work fast on it. So anything that can enable faster workflows. There's also the kind of machine learning AI stuff coming in. I still think that the big advance isn't so much going to be using machine learning to like clone amps or stuff like that. It's going to be in using like a ChatGPT style prompt where you say, give me the sound of, or write me a preset of Eddie Van Halen's balance tone, and then it just comes back at you and it drops all the appropriate effects in and says, what do you think? Give me some feedback. And you go, oh yeah, it's pretty good. Maybe if you could turn the overall effect mix down a little bit, and boom, it happens. So I'm actually sure that if that hasn't happened already, that it's going to happen very, very soon. So I do like that. Stuff like the Poly Bebo and the Mod Dwarf offer some interesting insights into where these products could go as well, like open sourcing things. There's Ada effects, there's Neural Amp Modeler. That kind of stuff is really, really exciting. I think rather than everything converging on something that's just going to be like the form factor, we're actually just going to see an explosion of different things where it'll be easier to run a laptop rig. The next generation, AxeFX and Helix, whatever they are, they're going to sound better and be easier to use. Maybe the Quad Cortex will actually get their plugin support at some time. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Like, what would be awesome stuff that you would actually use? Because I gig with an FM3. I could gig with that for the rest of my life. It sounds great. It's easy to use. It's compact. I don't need another thing, but I also need another thing. That's gas. My thoughts on the first Johnny Diesel and the Injectors album. If you're not familiar with Johnny Diesel, it's probably because you're not Australian. Diesel's a bit of an icon here in Australia, and rightfully so. Amazing singer and songwriter, and mean on the guitar. That's the album that has Crying Shame, which is one of my favorite Diesel songs on there. You hear a lot of cover bands play the other one, Tip of My Tongue, which is fine. Play that song lots. It's totally cool, but I much prefer Crying Shame as kind of like a bluesy, soul-driven thing. Really, really, really cool stuff. My favorite Diesel song, though, is Man Alive, and a couple of years ago saw him live at a festival, and they were incredible. They did that, and it was one of those moments where I was like, this song sounds so much better live than on the record, and the band was just nailing it. He was playing like a small body Maton guitar through an electric guitar rig as well, and just ripping. And whoever was playing bass on that rig, they were like playing up in the high octave, and they had this like Pog style effect on it. Sounded monolithic. So yeah, if you get the chance to see Diesel live, incredible. Deserves his status as a kind of icon of Australian music. And if you're not from Australia, go and check out the first Injectors album. It's some pretty smoking stuff. My thoughts on Seymour Duncan Hotrails. They are the pickup that introduced me to aftermarket pickups. I remember really enjoying playing a Strat when I was like 14 and thinking it'd be cool if you could have a humbucker in here, but I don't want to route the guitar out. And somebody I knew was like, Hotrails. And I actually have never tried a Hotrails pickup. I've got a Cool Rails. I think it's a Cool Rails, or maybe it's a DiMarzio. Definitely got a Cool Rails in something, probably in the neck pickup of my Hamer. And it's a really, really good pickup. I like that kind of rail pickup design. My favorite Duncan single coil size humbucker, though, is probably the little Screamin' Demon. And I have considered getting one of those to put in the bridge of my 77 Strat. But then I play that guitar, and the Sir Landau pickups that are in there work great. So I kind of see no reason to change that. But the little Screamin' Demon, that's the winner for me in the Duncans. Guitar-related injuries. There's two which come to mind. I've been fairly lucky over the course of my life. When I'd only been playing for about 2 years, I just kind of went to point something out to somebody, and I felt this side of my arm just kind of twinge, and I had this hot stabbing pain down it. And when I tried to play a guitar, it was super uncomfortable. I was later told it was probably something called cubital tunnel syndrome, carpal tunnels this side. Really, really painful. I took a week or 2 weeks off, and that seemed to sort it out. I haven't had a reoccurrence of that injury, so very, very fortunate there. Being a teenager and playing guitar and kind of, like that meme of the shrimp leaned over an 8-string guitar, that was me. So lots of posture problems, lots of stuff that I basically spent my 20s and 30s trying to fix in the gym, like shoulders that subluxed and a bunch of other things. So generally now I've kind of got a handle on all of that. Like my posture is infinitely better than when I was a teenager, and I've just got like more structure in my body, and I'm really conscious of trying to sit up straight and keep my shoulders level and take breaks. So I've had fewer of those issues over time. The worst one was I basically broke my finger the day before I went on tour, you know, putting on a new pair of shoes that were a bit tight, and there's a little tag at the back. So I had this finger hooked in the tag. Never again, kids, never going to do that one. But I pulled and I pushed with my foot and I just tweaked my finger and it just went black. And, you know, being the mature, responsible adult man that I am, I didn't go see a doctor about it. We were in the States. And yeah, it was the day before we did the longest tour we've ever done. And I just kind of played through the pain everywhere I could not use my first finger. I'd use these three fingers. So the first gig, yeah, basically just didn't use my first finger unless I absolutely had to. And, you know, there's this thing, the like Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck thing where you pull down on like the G string to do a whole tone and then a two-tone bend that I just couldn't do for years. It was just painful. I never got it looked at. And then I mentioned this to somebody who was a doctor and they said, what did it look like? What did you do? Yeah, you probably got, you know, a fracture, or at worst, you like badly bruised it. So that was not good. But I'm lucky that there were no long-term effects with that one. Well, I guess there were some long-term effects. I couldn't kind of do that for years. It's only been the last couple of years where I don't get any pain in my finger when I apply pressure on there. So yeah, that one was, let's say it was manageable, but still not ideal. The other thing as well is like shoulder stuff, you know, being a teenage kid, leaning over my guitar, heaps like that meme with the shrimp leaning over an 8-string, like lots of issues with my shoulders and my posture and my hips. So that's why now I try to sit up as straight as possible when I'm playing guitar, rest the guitar on my left leg so that my hands are where they are. And yeah, I've been super lucky that, you know, that seems to have sorted a lot of those issues out. And I go to the gym a lot and I try to do a lot of kind of exercises that will help prevent or mitigate any guitar-related injuries. So one thing I do want to do on the channel eventually is like get an actual like physiotherapist or a doctor who can go through things we should do as guitar players to not absolutely ruin our spines and our shoulders. So if you'd like to see that, I'm more than happy to fork out the money to find a specialist and do that video. It might be kind of interesting. And one last one, do I still practice the guitar? Yes, lots, probably more than I did when I was a teenager. Lots of targeted practice as well. Lots of things that are designed around optimizing my playing and making things that I can do easier. Lots of just hanging out and playing the guitar and not necessarily practicing either. I'm super fortunate where I get to play guitar a lot during the week and I kind of cherish every moment that I can on the instrument. You know, there is always something to learn and I try to be in that growth mindset as much as I can. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see some questions from all of you for next week's Q&A. Have a great week. Looking forward to getting some new ragdoll music out in a couple of weeks. I hope you enjoy your week playing guitar. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.